So welcome, 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 our brilliant and beloved colleague, Keita. We so appreciate your consistency, solidarity, and visionary leadership. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by giving thanks to our creator, by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Keita, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Thank you for having me. First of all, I just want to commend the work that you do as an organization. I think anybody who's trying to grow community in the way that you are, it's commendable work. For me, I think I just recently wrote this book called Strategy to Action. And the reason I wrote that book is because with a lot of the clients we work with, they come to us for one of two reasons. One, they're struggling to develop their business model. So we help them design a business model that's right for them. And then we help them design the conversations to drive revenue and measurable results. The number one thing that I found that people were struggling with is, number one, they were thinking on too short of a timeline. So what I learned from all the clients we work with is people were thinking too short, too small, and too solo. So when I say too short, I mean that people were thinking too close in. They were thinking 2, 3, 4 years in. And what we know from our research is high performers distinguish themselves between the time frame in which they think and act. And if you want to become a high performer, you need to first extend the timeline or time frame in which you're thinking and planning. And that was kind of the goal of that. And a lot of companies come to us to help them do that. So that's their thinking too short. Thinking too solo is that for many of us, for all different reasons, whatever it is, whether it's cultural or whatever, we feel like we have to do it ourselves. When the truth is we have to do it ourselves and we cannot do it alone. We need community. We need other people. And too many of us think about DIY, doing it ourselves, when sometimes bringing the expert takes us so much more further. So there's that great proverb of, if you want to do it fast, do it by yourself. If you want to do it, I can't remember. Oh, now I'm blanking on it. What's the proverb?
Fast alone or far together?
Far together,
I got
yes,
you. I
yes.
got you.
If you want to go far, go together like that. And that's kind of the piece there. Yeah, short, solo. So people think too small. And what I mean by that is, for most of us, for whatever reason, education-wise, especially for people of color, women, immigrants, etc., we tend to think on a small scale. We don't tend to think about how big things can be. So I come from an island. So by default, living in an island, you think about the boundaries of the island. And then you come to Canada and you're, holy smokes, Canada is way bigger. And then you start to think about the boundaries of Canada. And then you start to think globally. And there's a version of that that happens to all kinds of people where we don't think big enough. So part of what we do is we help people think much bigger and really help them hijack those three, let's call them mental models that can be holding us back. Is that, how do we help people think beyond that short-term goals? How do we help people think in community level in terms of teams? And then how do we help people think bigger? So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, it does. And I think of a lot of times some of the SPOs, social purpose organizations, or CSOs, community service organizations, businesses, nonprofits that struggle with this. So when I first heard about strategy to action, I was excited. And then when I've dived deeper into your model and framework and the way you're supporting your clients, I think it's phenomenal because, as you said, folks sometimes are thinking too small and too short. And we need to create dynamics where folks are thinking, like, a lot of entrepreneurs can't see past their own nose, or looking at next week now realizing that this is a marathon, as our illustrious ancestor now Nipsey Hussle said. There is a longevity to it, especially in terms of how high performers frame things out. And I think a lot of times, even as an entrepreneur, we think about just the boundaries of Canada. So I love the fact that you brought back in the island piece. My parents are from one of the smallest islands, St. Lucia, very tiny island. And I think a lot of times when we think about the expansive frameworks that we have to have in 2024 to build out a sustainable business model or framework, it's really important to recognize that there are billions of people on the planet.
So let me put another spin on that piece. So what I do, I help people a lot with strategy. So how do we go from strategy to action? And we do those programs inside their companies, etc. Some companies are like, hey, we want everybody to have that strategy to action mindset, so come in and do that program. Some people are like, hey, we want it in DNA. Some people they want it in a change management setting, whatever. I think what is often missing is the value piece. So, what is the value you're creating as an organization? So, let's say you're a social purpose organization, or you're a small fintech startup. The point is, how do you create value? And if you look at the Caribbean, for example, you had all these small islands that were creating a ton of value, and none of the value was going back into those islands. The value was going back to the colonial powers, and they extracted all of that from there. I think we're in a time where we're questioning a lot of those structures, and we're asking the question of who does this serve? So, for example, if you're a small social purpose business, you have to answer the question, okay, what problem am I solving? Who am I solving it for? And who's willing to pay for that? Right? So that's basics around building out your business model, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're fintech, whatever you're doing, that's some basic. But I think there's a place where we need to think about who and what is creating value and where's that value creation coming from. Now, the reason that question is interesting is if you look at art, there's some art that is valued and there's some art that is not valued. You look at community development. Community development is valued in a particular way, but it's not necessarily valued in a monetary way, right? And there's pieces where you look at research today where we live in a world where we have a epidemic of loneliness. So how do we rethink what value creation is in today's world? Using those three things that we talked about, let's think longer so we don't think so short, we think less so, and we think less small. I just want to add that because the islands are a great example of where the value creation and who got that value is a question I think we need to have more of. And there's a lot the world can learn from in those things. I hope I didn't get too political there. And like,
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, one thing in some context. Canada's the
right,
second largest country in the world after Russia. And the fact
right.
remains, if my parents immigrated to Canada in the 60s or early 70s. And definitely, I think that a lot of times when we look at business models, we are thinking in too short of a span and we are thinking too small. Often have this conversation with my colleagues around investment readiness versus export readiness. There's a lot of businesses within our community that are trying to become investment readiness or investment ready, but how many are export ready? So there's only about 600 to 700,000 Black people in Ontario. There's only a certain amount of people in general in Canada. So how do you develop a framework? Because I remember you mentioned what problem are you solving, who are you solving it for, and who's willing to pay you. So if these are some of the three guiding principles around business development that you're using in that construct, there's 7 to 8 billion people on the planet. How are you engaging them? So once again, a lot of times folks think way too small in terms of their ideas and their ideals. So I couldn't agree more with your model and what you're sharing. And I think it's very timely as folks become a little more expansive with their thinking. So my next question is, what's inspiring you right now in your current work? What has you curious or what's keeping you up at nights?
What has me curious is the work I recently put this book out into the world and it has a framework. And I wouldn't say it's keeping me up at night, but how people are innovating on it and using it in their work, I find to be absolutely awe-inspiring. So the question I'm trying to solve right now is how do I create a framework where it's easier for people to move from strategy to action? So what I mean by that is I was working with an organization recently and they went through the framework that I do and they turned their strategy into one-page strategy. But there's we did the strategy, we did their vision and mission, we did their strategy, and then we came up with a series of tactics, and they were able to put that in one page. The beauty of that is that they were able to share that with all sort of at all levels of their organization. And that means that they had a one-page strategy and tactics guiding document that they could share throughout the organization and track progress. That was an amazing value creation as far as I'm concerned. So the thing that's keeping me at night is how do I get better at that? How do I help organizations with really, really simple tools that help them do more of what they set out to do? How do I help these organizations become the mission-driven, purpose-driven organizations that they're doing, using my experience having seen multiple organizations go through it? So that's kind of what the thing that's keeping me up at night.
Very helpful, sir. Thank you so much. So my next question, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
I think one of the the biggest challenge that we have is that CEOs and decision makers are judged on short-term results and short-term consequences, and we are trying to encourage people to play both a short and long-term game, short, medium, and long-term game. And I think our biggest challenge is that because people have this sort of mindset of like, hey, we need to see results in this quarter, some of the things that we are talking about are asking people to think on a much longer timeline. So the example I use for that is Jeff Bezos talks a lot about what distinguished him. Or so I'll use two examples. If you ask Warren Buffett, why don't people make as much money as they can? He says because they're not comfortable making money slowly. Warren Buffett at one point 30, 40 years ago, he wasn't worth that much. But because he invested strategically and believed in slow money and the power of compound interest, he's now one of the richest men in the world. So he understood the strategy, stuck to it, right? I'm not saying that that's a value that everybody should go after, but that's one measure of success that we use in our world. Jeff Bezos, similar thing. When he reached a net worth of 163 billion, he was asked what did he attribute his success. He said, first of all, everything starts small, and he has 3 simple guidelines that determine everything he does. But more importantly, when he was asked about that, he said that one of his first letters to investors when he was CEO was that we're playing the long game. And his point was that if everybody's thinking on a 2 or 3 year time frame, when you're able to think on a 7, 10-year time frame, you're now competing against less people because you're investing on a timeline that nobody else is investing on. And you get to benefit from what Warren Buffett does, which is the compound interest piece. You get to benefit from small investments that create much bigger gains in the long term. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people because things that are short term are personal, immediate, and certain. Things that are long term are organized, deferred, and then gamble. So because of the way our brains work and because we grew up in the savannah lands and plains, we want the thing that's right now. We want that sweetie, right, that chocolate in front of us right now. It is very difficult for our brains to like push that away and say, hey, I'm not going to eat that chocolate. I'm going to eat this carrot because that gives me the long-term benefit that I want. And that's just very hard for our brains to do. I think that's the challenge for me in my work which is either getting people to start to see the benefits of playing the long game, one, or helping people move from being caught or trapped by the short term and starting to move from that to playing the long term. So I think that would be like I would answer the biggest challenge right now.
That's beautiful. I often think about our remarkable colleague Aliko Dangote. He started his business before I was even born. I was born in 1983. I'm 40. So he started Dangote Roots in 1981. And now he's one of the wealthiest Black men in the world. But not just that, he is built a refinery that is creating a dynamic where we're not just extracting from the continents, where it gives the continent some sovereignty. But think about that. It's like 1981 and now in 2024, up $19 billion. So I'm not trying to, inflate or raise awareness of capitalism by any means. But what I am trying to amplify is the importance of that long game, that long vision, those daily actions, and that generational thinking that can bring your business to a place of remarkable success. So once again, I appreciate all those examples that you gave and just the sheer brilliance in terms of getting folks in that mindset, because that mindset shift is so important. So my next question, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work?
Yeah, I guess my key priority, interesting, one of my key priorities is to get my keynote down around what I'm doing. But I think more importantly, a key priority for me in my work is to really refine the learning journey that we're taking our clients and our community on, and then refining that learning journey. What I mean by that is finding better ways to deliver the content that we teach in a faster, more efficient way. So I think that is kind of our biggest priority now. And so that'll be one. Tied right into that is how do we use things like artificial intelligence in a way that is ethical and value creation for both the end user and for us. And I think one of the principles we talk about here is you have to start from the outside in. It's very easy for me to say, hey, how do I use AI to create more value for me? What I'm really trying to say is, let's say people call me a consultant. I think there are too many consultants that are extracting from clients and not creating enough value for the end user, for their clients. And my priority is how do we create a world where the value ends up being bi-directional. So there are things that I'm doing, and I'm using technology to do it, things like AI, to help people create value in their world. So that I would say those would be my top two priorities. And then my third priority is quite frankly around my health. We are similar ages. I have a 5-year-old son, and my health, if without health, there is no wealth. Without my health, there's nothing I can do. I can't help people. I can't serve my purpose. I can't be of value to other people. So my third priority has to be my health right now, because I had knee surgery the other day. I had some other health situations happen. I was always somebody who was healthy, and I eat well and all that, but I'm even more committed to making sure that when I'm 90, I'm more likely to die from going for a run than from a heart attack. I wanna die active, if that makes sense. Which interestingly goes right back to that stuff that I was talking about, which is when you think about your health, we can't think about our health in terms of what we're gonna do. I want to lose weight in the next 6 months. I think the longer you think about your health and you think about longevity of your health, what would I look like? What would healthy look like for me when I'm 95? Is a very different question from like, how do I lose 20 pounds? Because I can lose 20 pounds in a very unhealthy way and I achieve my objective. But if my goal then becomes, hey, at 95, I still want to be able to like lift weights, run a marathon, whatever. Like, for example, my mom runs marathons. She just got an award for being the oldest person in the race, which is hilarious. Uh, and she's recently just started doing strength training at a CrossFit gym. So she's doing like snatches and deadlifts and all that kind of stuff. And she's in her 70s, right? So what does it mean to age well? I think would be my third priority around longevity, because my biggest asset is my brain. I write books. People call me a thought leader. I consult. So if I'm going to be doing that kind of work, I have to take care of my body, because that's the biggest value that I'm bringing to the world. So I think those would be my three priorities.
Indeed, that's incredible. Aging well.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, we're similar ages. I grew up in Toronto, East Toronto, and a lot of my friends died through gun violence. Over the past 4.5
Mm.
years, 6 of my friends, childhood friends, that are all same age as me, have died of heart attacks. It's crazy. So on the front end, in our teens, we're running from a bullets, and right now we're running from high blood pressure, hypertension, cholesterol. So I couldn't agree more in terms of health being wealth. Even I've in a corporate, thank God for my wife, walk with my daughters every morning to the tennis. And so it becomes a lifestyle piece. And like you said before, once again, it's a mindset shift. It's not about that 6-month outputs based goal. It's about a lifestyle change. So it's about outcome, not output. So once again, I appreciate your brilliance. My second last question.
So I don't talk about as much, but coming from Trinidad, a lot of my friends died from gun violence, and then I moved to Vancouver, and to me, Vancouver was like this perfect kind of place. Like I was like, whoa, you guys don't have many kinds of challenges. One of the things I noticed about 5 or 10 years ago, so people who look like you and I noticed that a lot of my dad's friends, etc., were getting heart attacks, being diagnosed with diabetes, etc. And then they were radically changing their diets. And I decided, hey, I'm not going to wait till I get the diagnosis. I'm not going to wait till I get the high blood pressure diagnosis to then change my lifestyle and my approaches. I'm going to do that now, which again goes back to long-term thinking. You have to think about where you want to be. And I don't know what your background was like, but my friends who died by gun violence, they didn't expect to live past 22. So because they didn't expect to live past 22, they lived a life as if they weren't going to live fast, die young kind of scenario, right? I had an uncle who said, look, he said to me, look, the kids that you're hanging out with, they don't expect to live past 22. So the risks that they're taking are on a 22-year time horizon. I want you to think at the time he said 75, 80, because that's what the life timeline now is. Now we're expecting people to live to 120, 110. But my point is that simple question that my uncle told me was like, how do you make decisions that are on a 75, 80 time horizon? I found that to be absolutely transformative. And for folks like you and I, and most people in this world, you will either come to cancer of some kind, diabetes, some kind of cognitive disease, dementia, or something like that, or a heart attack. Those are the 4 ways that most of us are going to die. All 4 of those things can be tackled with how we eat and how we move. So just by moving more regularly and eating better, you could take those 4 off the table. And I think we don't pay enough credence or credit to that in the world of business and all of that, because it matters. It matters how we end the race. If you run a race and you don't finish strong, I think that's a problem. I come from an athletic background. They always say finish the race strong. But we only look at it from one metric in terms of money. But we're not looking at the metric of how do we actually finish this race we call life in a way that's strong. And I think that's a piece that I just want to tackle on and add on to that. As somebody, it sounds like you have a similar background to me, that I didn't see the world like that. And if one young person hears what I just said and it changes their perspective, it changes your life. It saves your life, because you're not thinking on a 22-year horizon. You're thinking at 75, 80, 90, 120. With technology today, we might live to 120. But you have to have that mindset to begin with.
That's beautiful, and I couldn't agree more. If I could go back, like I did not think I was going to see past 25. It's just based off
Yeah,
of
neither did I.
your group and our decision making. And if I had known I'd be 40 with a wife and 4 children, my decision making would have been very, very different in so many ways.
But even like, I'll give you something. I'll give you an example. I met my wife after I was 22, and I realized, oh, you're going to live past 22 or whatever. And she was like, hey, somehow we end up talking about it. I'm like, I don't expect to live past 65, 70, because no men in my family have lived past 65, 70. My wife got mad at me. She was like, what do you mean? And then what I realized is my grandfather died from cancer, which he didn't pay attention to. My other uncles died from like high blood pressure, heart attack, all of those things. Like, I'm a runner, I lift weights. She's like, all of those things are absolute game changers. If you just keep exercising, it means that you're not going to live to 65, 70. You could add 20 years to your life, right? And it's a really simple thing, but that even moving from like, oh, I'm 22. So this goes back to like think bigger. Like most of us tend to think too small or think too short. I was thinking like, hey, after 22, I live past, oh, you know what? I'll probably live to like 50, because most of the men in my family didn't live past 60, right? And that's a huge thing. Like, think about how many young people that happens to. Because all we think about is like, I'm just lucky to be alive today. We're like, wait a minute, what if I could live to be 120? What would my world look like? What would I need to do differently? And I think it matters. I think those things are really small things, but they're such game changers, I believe.
I couldn't agree more. I remember my daughters were born. I was like, just give me 50, God. Just give me, now I'm at
Yeah,
40.
yeah,
I'm
exactly. And it's crazy.
I'm 40.
Yeah, it's
I'm
crazy. And I want to challenge you to think longer. Like, what do you mean give you 50? No, give you 100. Give you 110, you know? So,
Amen. Ashe, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate this conversation. It's definitely very different from many of the conversations on our platform, but so important in so many ways and applies
yeah.
to life and business and impact and innovation. So my second last question, what is your ultimate goal? And what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
So success for us, I think, is building a community of people who are trying to add value into the world in the form of running or creating businesses. So they're creating businesses in some way, and we have a community of people who they have decided that the way I'm going to add value into the world is to create an engine that the purpose of which is to solve some problem, create value, and the constraint that we have is that we have to make profit. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that profit is not a necessity of a business, it's a constraint. And the purpose of the business is to create value in the world for the people you serve. And we want to build a community of people around that who are like-minded, who want to build these businesses, who understand the value of community, coaching, education, and all of that. I think that would be how we would see our ultimate vision, is that creating a community like that.
Ashe. So do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
Closing thoughts or calls to actions. I think one of the things that I think could be most valuable for people is really getting a sense of what are the hard truths that are in front of us and what do we already know that we're pretending not to know. And what I mean by that is, let's say I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and they come to us because they have some kind of problem or somebody's referred them. And I often ask the question of, what do you already know that you're pretending not to know? I already know that my business partner has different values from me, and I need to like separate from there. My call to action to you is to really lean into the uncomfortable truths that you're pretending not to know. And if you do that alone, it can be quite a valuable experience for you in terms of whatever you're trying to build and whatever you're trying to create in this world.
Amen. I think that applies to so many areas of so many people's lives, leading into those uncomfortable truths. And once again, I just applaud your dynamism, your brilliance, your authenticity, your candor, transparency, and your visionary leadership, my beloved brother. I appreciate you and you taking out your time to invest in this conversation. As always at Setsi, we close the way we began this conversation by giving thanks to our creator, by giving thanks to the original stewards, the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Keita, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Ashe.